Hi, I'm Dr. Megan McNamara Monday, coming to you from my office in private practice in Maryville, Tennessee. Today I want to talk to you about relationships. Relationships are such a huge focus in therapy. In fact, that's most of what we talk about because they're such a big part of our lives. They're really the landscape through which we feel connected, belonging, kind of these really basic human needs. A lot can go wrong in relationships, and some of us have the red flags that present themselves, and some of us take heed of those, and some of us ignore those. So I wanted to talk a little bit about codependency and healthy versus unhealthy relationships. So codependency is something that's thrown around in the psychology world quite a bit. It's not actually a diagnosis. However, I find that a lot of people either grew up with a codependent dynamic or experience it in their own relationships. So where this comes from originally was out of the addiction recovery literature. And so what that means is when someone is an addict, you can imagine it's difficult to function. And so what happens is a lot of times they would attract someone who is a caretaker, caregiver. And this was something that helped the family system and the relationship continue to survive despite whatever kind of chaos or dysfunction was kind of going on in the background. So a lot of the clients that I work with are highly sensitive people, or what I like to call an empath. And so what happens is those people are healers. They've got a lot to give. They give of themselves. They like to be of service. And so in the traditional sense of things, they can be caretakers. And so a lot of times what I find in relationships is opposites attract. And so what happens is you tend to find a sensitive, healer, caring, giving, kind person with someone who's a taker. And so a lot of times that's where we find ourselves in abusive or kind of narcissistic relationships. And these relationships can kind of destroy people pretty quickly. And so this is something definitely to watch out for. So the idea is when two half people are coming together to kind of find that belonging and loving connection without being able to self-soothe or be alone or be a full person, just intact by themselves, what happens is kind of a sort of relationship addiction. And so people really get kind of hooked on the relationship. And so because they don't have the ability to self-soothe, for the caretaker, it's about distracting by taking care of everybody else. For the people who are the takers, it's about getting their needs met, kind of whatever the cost. And so both sort of scenarios kind of have some unhealthy dynamics to it. So when you're looking for a healthy relationship, what you want to look for is a relationship where you're giving and you're receiving. So a lot of times what I find for people is they get kind of stuck on either end of the extreme. Either I'm really comfortable giving and I'm not comfortable receiving, or I want to take everything and I don't feel comfortable giving. So you really want to have that equal exchange to have a healthy dynamic. So a lot of times what happens in kind of the narcissistic cycle of things is that there's a pretty typical cycle that happens. The first part of it is what they call love bombing. And so this is like what you see in all the movies, you know, the most romantic. A lot of times narcissists will lie to tell you what you want to hear, so they kind of like trap you in that scenario. And so they a lot of times have charisma. They can be very romantic. They can shower you with like flowers and gifts and all sorts of things. And there's nothing wrong with any one of those things per se, but if it's used for a tool of manipulation, that's where we kind of get into the problem. Then what happens is they can't live up to that image of being 10 feet tall. And so the inevitable kind of downfall happens after that. And so then tension builds, there's conflict, and then sort of the cycle of gaslighting happens. And what happens is they will kind of like erode a person's sense of self. They'll isolate them from their support system. They will kind of test them to see how much they will take and kind of erode their boundaries and kind of sense of self. And then that can spiral into emotional, physical, sexual abuse, and all kinds of kind of just emotional chaos. So then what happens is after the incident of abuse happens, then we switch all the way back full circle into kind of the romantic, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to you, and then the cycle starts all over again. So what happens is people get addicted to the high highs and the low lows. So whether you're dealing with a relationship addiction or a drug addiction, when you have a high, it's immediately going to be dysregulating because what follows a high is a low. So it's like you're continually kind of chasing that high, but you're never gonna have kind of an even keel sort of thing because it's a constant kind of cycle of ups and downs. So a lot of times I see clients who've kind of lived through this, and the after effects of narcissistic abuse can really last a long time. They can contribute to suicidal thoughts, depression, anxiety. They can really kind of just wreak havoc on your ability to function once you've lived through something like that. There is hope always. I would seek treatment. There's also ACOA groups, those sort of things. But I think kind of spotting the red flags in advance is kind of the best way to prevent something like that happening. I also wanted to talk a little bit about soulmates. So I think a lot of our romantic notions and the idea of soulmates or twin flames are kind of rooted in this idea that we need someone else for completion. And so in the case of relationship addiction, I may not be able to self-soothe myself. So when I feel close to this other person, it makes me feel safe, even if it's not a safe situation. And so what happens is it's like the person becomes the drug, and we need that person to feel okay. So one of the biggest things I work on with therapy is to help people enjoy being alone. Like if you can learn to self-soothe, enjoy yourself, be okay by yourself, first of all, it's incredibly seductive and attractive. And it means you'll be okay no matter what. And so if someone else comes into your life, all the better. One thing that I think is also important in the realm of soulmates and twin flames and that sort of thing is that I think a soulmate comes into your life to challenge you. And so opposites attract. And I do find that there is something called kindred spirits where people have a lot in common, they're on the same path. It's an easy connection, it's immediate. And I think that those people really are great for just like enjoying yourself and having positivity, great friendships, camaraderie. I think you can have a kindred spirit that's a soulmate. But what I find a lot of times is the people we end up with really challenge us. And so sometimes that challenge is not necessarily comfortable. And so it may kind of shake some of our stuff up as we're kind of dealing with these things. And so I think it is important to kind of, again, have that equal give and exchange in a relationship, to have someone that challenges you, to be able to be alone and be able to be together, and to really have both people kind of pulling their weight in the relationship. And if you find that you're in a relationship where all you're doing is giving and the other person is taking, I would really be mindful of the risks there and, Google narcissism, see if that's what's happening. So I want to encourage everybody to just kind of love themselves, and then I think that is the easiest way to attract a partner if that's what you're looking for. Or, with this Valentine's Day, I think just really like appreciating, love for yourself and for the world. If you're interested in more kind of therapy nuggets on the go, feel free to check out my website, www.rightonbrain, right, like RIGHT, and that gives you some tools for activating your right brain, which is a big part of living in the present moment and having happiness and fulfillment in your life. Thanks for watching. Bye.